Hello, Freedom Finders. Would you say that you are grappling with the decision to become a parent? Have you been deciding if it's the right decision for you personally and just in terms of the way that the world is on a grand scale? Well, I'm so excited for you to tune in to this conversation with Maree Stachel-Williamson. She's the author of The Baby Dilemma, How to Decide. And I'm really excited for you because now you'll get to learn more about her book if you haven't read it yet. And her book is an experience. While reading her book, you get to learn about myths associated with becoming a parent versus being child-free. And you get to evaluate your goals along with doing a bunch of exercises that help you to really zone into your values and what you want and what's important to you for your future. So I came across Maree's book because if you haven't already noticed, I tend to overthink. I overthink a lot. And this decision has been one that has been stressing me out for many years. And so I just wanted to go through a comprehensive process that would help me to understand what do I need to be thinking about, what is not even on my radar, and where am I at? How can I take the time and dedicate myself to this process and slow down to kind of at least tune in to what's going on with this decision. So I'm very excited for you to tune into our conversation. And if this is a decision that you're having difficulty making, I highly encourage you to check out Maree's book and take the time to go through all the exercises and make a well-informed decision for yourself. Hello. This is Alisia Young, and welcome to Teach Me Freedom. This podcast is about learning how to live a freer life from authors, entrepreneurs, and experts. Those who have done it and who teach others how to do it as well, and what it feels like while applying those methods to our lives along the way. Every episode will deliver resources, anecdotes, and/or reviews to support you in living a more freedom-filled life. Let's jump in. Please note the video version of this episode is available on YouTube at Teach Me Freedom. The link is also mentioned in the show notes. Enjoy.
I'm not for or against having children, but unfortunately with the overturning of the Roe v. Wade ruling in the US, the decision whether to become a parent or not has become much more complex, as the individual's level of autonomy and safety is reduced heavily in some states. This makes the decision whether you want to have children or not all the more important because a stronger risk management plan needs to be in place if you're not sure. This means really thinking about who you want to be in a sexual relationship with, getting more knowledgeable about your cycle of fertility, and being diligent about contraceptive use. It also means as a male in a sexual relationship with a female, taking contraception very seriously if you're not sure about wanting to become a father. It includes knowing how to access abortion facilities outside of your state in the case of unwanted or life-threatening pregnancy, and how to access funding. It means knowing the support services available and knowing what your rights are. My heart goes out to the girls, women, and all the people in those states and other places in the world in general who have had their decision-making process become more stressful and complex, as well as those from whom the decision has been taken away entirely.
Hello, Freedom Finders. So excited to introduce you to Maree and really excited to jump into some questions and conversations with her. Maree, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Leisha. Lovely being here.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you again. Maree and I had the opportunity to talk prior to actually getting ready for this episode, and just I fell in love with Maree from that conversation. So really excited to see you again.
Adorable.
Oh, thank you. So let's begin. So Maree, please tell us about yourself and please tell us about why you chose to write the book, The Baby Dilemma, How to Decide.
So, where do I start? I guess
I'll try and answer the first part of that question. So I'm
Sure, no problem.
a therapist working in Christchurch, New Zealand, and I've been working since 2004, which is when I did my NLP training. And over the years, kind of picked up various other modalities. The big one, I guess, that I added on was counselling training just before the earthquakes here, kind of like 2009, 2000. Let me try and work it out. Yeah, around about then. And the reason why I wrote the book was because I found myself in this like really unexpected space of feeling stuck about that question. And that blew my mind because I had literally like throughout my childhood, like at least 10 years, like I'd kind of collected and like saved my childhood books. And when I was working at a bookstore as a maybe 19-year-old, I would buy extra childhood books, like cool kids books, because I'd be like, yeah, I want to collect these for my children, you know. And I even kept a textbook from university about working like raising children with disabilities, you know, just in case. So I really was gathering all my resources, and I'd done a lot of babysitting growing up and kind of had a big hand in raising my younger brother as well. And so children was like a given for me. And then went overseas, came back, and then, you know, and even, you know, with boyfriends, kind of would always think like, is this someone who I can imagine raising a kid with, you know, like that kind of question. And you know, my husband was answered like in my head, I was like, yes, I really could imagine like he has all the like personality traits, and I feel safe with him, and I can kind of trust who he is and how we interact. Like it was given for me. And then, but I'd always pushed it off in my head. I kind of thought I'd be doing it like in my 30s in a way. So I really didn't think about it apart from just this like busy beavering of like gathering my resources.
Yes.
And then when it got to like early 30s, early 30s, and I really started kind of going, oh, okay, so I need to make this decision, and noticed I wasn't sure. And that kind of blew my mind and was quite distressing, I guess. And then I had to figure out, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because I was reading lots of books and getting books out in the library about parenthood and what it's like, and talking to people, and I would just get these like super Disney-fied answers or like really mixed messages and stuff. And I found it really confusing, and I couldn't find anything which really allowed me to kind of systematically or logically look at it from a whole pile of different angles so that I could make a really good decision about it. And that's what I realized I really wanted. So yeah, that started the journey for myself. And then I think I'd already written some sexuality books and enjoyed the process of that. And so I thought, you know what, like I'm going to start my process and I'm going to document and almost work it out as I go. What do I think are all the components of what needs to be looked at in order to make this decision?
That's awesome. And thank you for your very thorough answer and allowing us to get to know you some more and what led to this, and for taking the time to document it and then share it with us as we go through that process ourselves and are looking for that tool, but do not desire to create such a tool or don't know how. With your book, what did you at the time when you wrote it, and what kind of impact do you hope that it will have?
You know, when I wrote it, I just wanted clarity myself, kind of from a really selfish reason. And I figured if I managed that, then hopefully I'd be able to help some other people. Mm-hmm. And that's still the case. Like it's out there. And if anyone finds it and that's a dilemma that they're going through, and if they can go through it and find some sense of clarity, I'm stoked, you know, like awesome.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, that's very awesome. I'm thinking about like the process that I went through when writing the answers to the exercises and
cool.
Really looking at everything and looking at just all the different things to consider, because I know that I've personally had some fears that are stronger than others. And then it was cool to see that, okay, definitely not alone. I mean, there's so much to consider, but it's really cool to see that, hey, everybody,
for the most part, is considering many of these things. That leads me to the next question, because one of the things you lead with in the book is some of the myths about parenthood. And I'm curious about what you believe the top three are, because you shared several. And so I guess part of that is that question of which ones do you feel have the most intensity underlying them?
I think there's a myth that once they're there, you'll love it. What I discovered actually by talking to some people, the brave people who were honest with me, some people would say like, no, I don't love it, and it's such an intense thing to do on the chance that apparently I'm going to love it. So I think that's just a super intense one. I find any assumption is a kind of a wobbly reason for thinking that it's a good idea to have kids. So lots of people have these ideas of, I want to raise a little me. And like if it's your genetic material, then like probably on some level it's going to look like you. But if that extends to they're going to be personality wise like me, like I remember at some point when I was thinking about it and realizing if I have a child, this might sound ridiculous, but like I'm gonna have to be okay if it's a kid who's really into chess or rugby. And they want to just go to like some kind of monster chess tournament that like goes all afternoon or all weekend, or they're like really into rugby and I'm so not interested in rugby, and it might be taking like and they might have to like, I'll have to be okay with that because like they're their own little person.
Yeah.
So again, like any assumption around, like really want to be a parent because I just can't wait for grandchildren.
Okay.
It's like, like that's so intense to just like that's your reason for being here, just so that I get to be a grandparent. So I find that pretty hard.
That's thinking very far ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone necessarily. I'm not saying that people decide to have children solely for these reasons, but often you'll hear them, and there are these just interesting assumptions like, I want to have children because I don't want to be lonely when I'm old.
Yeah.
Or I want to have children because I want someone to take care of me when I'm old. Again, like it's kind of what I think of as like wobbly ground, because when I wrote that book, like just a couple of summers beforehand in Europe, there'd been like these massive heat waves, and it was these devastating stats that were being reported in the news around Europe of all these old people, these elderly people who were dying in the heat waves, and their families were over having a summer holiday in Mallorca or something. And it was this kind of really threw that argument in its face, just because you have children, or like when you're old, there's no guarantee there. I think I really love logic, to be honest. So I liked the idea of looking at what are the myths for both. What rubbish am I telling myself that is guaranteed or that is a definite if I become a parent, and also if I'm, without a child or children, and to really like unpack all of that. I think that was what the book's purpose was, is like, let's just unpack everything and like, look at what I'm assuming, look at what everyone's saying. I don't know if that was three. That was three.
You were saying the grandchild one, that was interesting. Oh wow, I didn't know that people thought that far ahead. The loneliness.
Like I said, I don't think that they necessarily do like decide I'm going to have a child because, but I think it's sometimes part of it. You'll hear people saying, I really want to have family, and I have these images of Christmases and that the house is full, and like that I get to be the grandparent, and I really want that experience, and or like walking my daughter down the wedding aisle, or like there's this whole narrative that might be built around all of that stuff. That was part of the stuff that I realized is like, what are some of these assumptions that I might even be having? Your child might not be into Christmas. They might move to a different country. They might not like you. They might be like, no, Mom, I'm not going to have any kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then how important is that aspect, and can I be flexible in that I can say, well, again, like, you're your own person, and my happiness in my life is my responsibility, not yours.
Absolutely. Yeah. All of that makes total sense. And it's like it's a lot to put on a person who doesn't even exist yet, or people who don't exist yet. So it's just a great,
Totally.
yeah, I think it's like a really good process to go through, because I feel like that's where a lot of I don't want to sound like stereotypical, but a lot of things, I know, like, I'm looking into things, unresolved issues that I have that are influencing me now, which are unresolved childhood issues. And
Yes.
I'm talking to a therapist counselor, so you totally understand and get it, because you deal with that like on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's amazing that anybody is going to take the time to go through that process and really sit with these things, and, as you said, unpack them, because I think it makes them very, very just going forward in a very well informed, even if there's things they're still uncertain about, just more informed and having it on their radar, just going through this process itself.
Yeah, so that makes me think of, again, like, that whole thing about, I don't want to be lonely when I'm old.
Yeah.
For me, that's kind of like, oh, where does that come as a topic? Like, where did that even come from, that you have this fear of being lonely when you're old? Like, maybe there's some kind of, maybe we back up a little bit, and maybe there's some work that maybe there's some old baggage there,
Yeah.
or it's a little bit like when people say, do they actually say it out loud? I'm not too sure, but sometimes there is that. Sometimes people tell me afterwards, like, I thought having a kid would really help us as a couple bond. I thought that would bring us together. And it's like, ugh, if the relationship was really rocky to start with, and you didn't have good communication, and you didn't connect, and you didn't know how to build intimacy, throwing a baby into the mix, like, yeah, that's going to make things harder, actually. It's that pushing pause and saying, yeah, unpacking, checking, what's this actually about? I don't have any stats on this, but it feels kind of a unique situation to be in this particular situation where you really get to choose. I do remember reading, and I was blown away at the time, how many people have their children, like, at least their first one, it's an accident. It's really high.
As a starting statistic to get you going down the rabbit hole, as mentioned in the State of the World Population Report 2022, which was released by the UNFPA, which stands for the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, nearly half of all pregnancies, which are totaling 121 million each year throughout the world, are unintended. And this was published on the United Nations Population Fund website on March 30th, 2022. Of course, there's many reasons influencing that statistic or information in the link in the show notes.
So it's really high, and then yet you have all these other people that it's not as big of a dilemma, like they're swayed in one or the other way. And so all of these, like, nitty gritty details and unpacking and all that stuff just, like, isn't important to them, because it's just like, nah, oh, it'll be fine. Like, we'll figure it out, and that's fine. That's totally okay for them. And yet there are some people like me, and maybe like you, who are just like, oh, I'm so stuck. And what do I do? And how do I navigate this?
Yes.
And then my brain goes, okay, well, if I'm going to navigate this, and if I'm going to make a really good decision, then I'm going to go deep, Like, and especially when I was thinking about helping, like, thinking this is not just for me, but for others as well, then of course I want to really offer a kind of a smorgasbord of ideas and ways to look at it, because there might be one or two questions which are kind of don't really tick the box for some people, and others that do.
So, as you said that, of like how sometimes, for example, sometimes people want to really, really think it through, and then other people are like, either or they can just be kind of thrown into the situation. It gives me, like, even more, actually, it's one of the things that I gained from this book as well, from reading your book, is I already had this appreciation for my parents, because I'm like almost 10 years older than them when they had me. And so I'm just like, how did you have me? Like, I can't even fathom that. I'm just like, that's amazing, because I'm scared right now. I don't know. And it's like, they didn't read all this stuff. They did their thing. And I'm just like, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So it gave me
I've had
appreciation for them.
totally. I've had situations like that. I think mum was 19 when she had like my older brother or something. I'm just like, oh, I can't even, like, what? Legend for getting through that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I've had that feeling like, I'm too young to have children. I'm like, I'm 42. So it's like, what the hell, Maree? You know, but like that's sometimes how I feel. I'm too young to have children. And at other times I feel like, oh no, I've already raised my children. And that's wild as well because of doing all the childcare so early on. And I did like a 1-year live-in nanny scenario as well. So I really feel like, oh, my child raising years are like, I've been there, done. It's such ridiculous, but it's so, again, it's that unpacking ourselves, and going like, what's going on here? It's a big job anyway. Like, let's just put that out there. It's a big job. Like, respect to anyone who's doing it.
Definitely. Yeah.
If it wasn't clear, I'm not doing it. I'm not a parent.
Curious about, how do you feel about your decision to not become a parent in this manner, because you were still a parent caregiver, just not maybe the primary caregiver, but yeah, so how do you feel now about the decision that you made then?
I'm so happy. I'm so relieved. Yeah, I'm really relieved. There's a sentence that always comes back to me that I think I read in a book somewhere, and it was like, with the way that some people describe it, where they say, I love my children, but I don't love the job of being a parent. And I always found it really ironic when people would tell me, and this is like some of the like the advice that I really loved, when people would say to me, don't have a child, like don't become a parent unless you really want to. And these would sometimes be people who had accidental births. And I found that really interesting because I'd be like, you didn't think about it. You didn't necessarily get that choice. But what you're telling me is that you, like, I should really, really think about it and like really, really want it. Interesting, you know?
Yeah.
And so when someone, you often find parents, if they are like downloading about the stress or about stuff that's going on with their kids, sometimes then they'll backtrack if they discover that you're kind of really listening. And they'll go, oh, no, but like, don't get me wrong. I love my children. Like, I wouldn't want to get rid of them. I wouldn't wish them away. And so I started kind of piecing it all together, and I noticed, okay, well, my little Johnny isn't on the planet right now. And so I wouldn't have to wish him away. And more what I was discovering was, you know, this kind of daily grind. That's kind of harsh wording for it, but that's kind of how it feels like to me sometimes. This huge ongoing, like, the amount of people, friends who have children who say, thank goodness it's like the school holidays are over and they go back to school.
Oh, yeah.
No, so like the job of parenting, I just noticed like, wow, that I'm not sure I'm up for that. You know, like I'm much better with children, and I can give so much more love by being in that babysitter role, or by being like the friend of their parents who then comes over, even if it's once a year or even less, or more often, like whatever it is. And then I can like bring out all the energy that I need to be able to like hardcore play and have fun and connect and show that love and care. And yet, I'm not too sure about that on a day-to-day basis. Something that I really, really thought of when I was a teenager, that when I was doing babysitting, and all the parents who, you know, they would either have me like come over every week, like on a particular night, and then they might have me come over on the weekends sometimes, and they would go out on their dates. There was one couple actually that they would go out when I would come and babysit, they would go and do their separate thing. That was how they said, like, so for some it was date night, and for others it was like, great, we get to each have some me time. But I really remember thinking, if I have kids in the future, I need to earn enough money that I can pay a babysitter. Yes. You know, like I saw my role as really, really important for their mental well-being.
Yes. And that ability to take care of yourself too. So that you have something, if that was the decision you would have made then, to give.
Totally, yeah.
Not deplete yourself. Yeah.
It's my babysitter. Shit, I can't be the babysitter for my own kids.
I really love that you said that, because that was something that came to mind for me when I was reading your book. It's like,
interesting.
Because I'm thinking right now, I'm leaning towards wanting to be a parent, but then my concerns are all financial, mainly
Mm.
financial, but body image and body related things. But then it's like that part, it's like, because being such an introvert, I'm like, I know I would need that time for myself. And I'm like, I want to have enough money to have a babysitter for the child, the children, and then like up to pet sit. Because I know for sure, without a doubt, I want to have
Yes.
pets. But the
Cute.
human, I'm not too 100%
Whoa.
sure on yet.
That's
yeah,
funny that you
that
mentioned the
care.
introvert thing is funny, because me and my husband are both introverted, and we notice sometimes the energy of both of us in the house is too much for both of us, and we're like, wow, should we just can we do our own thing? Yeah, awesome. And it's really nice just to be able to put our own energy in ourselves, and our
Yes.
ongoing joke. It's become a little bit of a joke when people ask us if we have kids, and we'll say something like, if we had kids, we'd both be in the shed. This cliche of the man saying, oh, I'll be in the shed, or I'll be in the garage, I'll be working on my thing,
Oh, like the man cave?
The man cave. Yeah, like I'm in the man cave. But we'd both be in the man cave. And our poor kids sitting there like, who's looking after us? Everybody. And of course we'd need two man caves, right? Because sharing the man cave together, that would be too much energy.
No. That defeats the purpose of the man.
So this is that whole thing, like really unpacking everything and just if you have the chance, it's a big decision to make. So let's give it the seriousness it, I think, deserves.
Yes, I agree. It's been a good process, and it's opened up more. There's more still to explore, but it's like it's led to this awareness, because I know prior to reading this book, I was feeling a lot of anxiety around it, because part of it was I don't even know what to be considering. And then it's like putting like you said, like, what about your energy and protecting that and making sure that you're giving each other space, and that and it led me to start to think about different scenarios and looking at my daily life now and what my concerns are with life now, and then bring another person who would be responsible for in many ways into the mix. It's like sometimes I feel life right now is a bit much. So and then to bring somebody, it's like I don't want to put that on them. Kind of want to have things figured out at for the most part. But it's just there's been a lot of thinking, a lot. So it's good. It's good.
Cool. And I noticed as well that, I think for lots of people, and that was for me as well, that, even if there was some freak accident and I somehow managed to get pregnant and I hadn't planned it, and it was like, oh shit, and I'm way too far along now, and for whatever reason, I don't even feel okay about doing an abortion. I know I definitely wouldn't be okay about going through pregnancy and then giving the kid away. Oh, that's not an option. But if I ended up with a baby, I know within my skill set, I'd be able to manage things. I'd be able to sort it all out. It would be fine. I would freaking love that baby. And I'd be saying what did I even think that I couldn't do this? So it's kind of knowing that you can do it if it happens. Again, that there's this unique scenario, right? Where, but at the moment I'm not in that situation. So what do I want to do? This is a decision, and how can I make it?
Making that choice, really informed choice. I love that.
Cool.
My next question for you is, what's the best and worst advice that you or people that you know have received when it comes to going through this process to make this kind of decision?
So I still think kind of the best advice, just because it got me thinking so deeply, was that thing about don't have kids unless you're really sure. And the fact that was coming from people who had accidental births. I found that so interesting. That sparked such an interesting thought process in my head. To be honest, I don't think I really got any other good advice. I got just random advice. Just do it. You'll love it. Just random blanket. That's not how I work. I don't just that just seems so. That didn't work. Also, something that I thought was, for me, bad advice, but might be good for someone else. When we were seriously thinking about it, people told us that we should get our fertility tested. And they said, well, if you're not sure and you're still mulling over it, man, and I was early 30s. But anyway, they said you should go to a fertility place and, each get worked out. What's your egg scenario like? What's your sperm scenario like that kind of thing, you know?
Okay.
And for a little moment, I considered it, I guess. And then I kind of went further in that thought process or of the process in my head, and then realized that they would either be coming back to us and saying, your fertility is in a good, healthy state, or it's good for you and not for you, or the other way around, or both of your fertilities aren't in a great, healthy space. And I just thought psychologically, I don't know if that's a great thing to add to this mix. You know, like I think we've all been in I speak for myself, you know, we've all been in a situation where we've said to ourselves, okay, I'm no longer going to eat this particular food.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Like,
yes.
Okay, no, it's not a thing now. I'm not going to, and in that moment, you want that food. Right?
Yes.
And I definitely heard women that say that once they get those, that like they maybe they're of a certain age and they've been trying to have kids and it hasn't happened, you know, and then they go to an IVF clinic or something, and then they find out, oh, actually, yeah, it's not such in a great space. And that's when like this massive grief and kind of trauma about the whole thing comes. And it's one thing to do that when you know that you definitely want kids. So you're like, well, for whatever reason, it's not working, so we're going to go down this route, and therefore, okay, this is just kind of part of the parcel. But as a thing where just to find, it didn't seem like a good piece of advice, because I knew that would just throw all sorts of weird shit in the mix.
Yeah.
And I kind of, when I started thinking about that, I was kind of cracking up, because technically, you know, since becoming sexually active, I could have easily, like, a number of times become pregnant, and I didn't. So maybe I'm infertile. Like, I don't know.
Or maybe it wasn't your fertile windows.
Or maybe right?
Yeah.
But it's so I love the fact that I don't even know that.
Yeah.
And I love that neither me nor my husband have that background of, you know, if I wanted kids, I couldn't with you.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not cool. So I understood the logic of what they were saying, but it didn't work for me. And I think just in terms of thinking about other people, I think it comes back to those assumptions again, what people get told, which just feels like bad advice. Kind of like, oh, do it, you're great with kids. Like, I've definitely had that one as well. And I think, like, being good with kids is really different from like raising them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like 24/7.
Yeah.
20 years.
And anything which is someone, how do I describe this? Like someone giving advice which is a reflection of their reality and their worldviews. We don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, I think there was a beautiful, when I was looking online, some kind of, was it Quora, or did that even exist back then? I can't even remember, but it was like a web board chat thing about what people were thinking, and someone had written the only question that is worth asking is just, are you ready for chapter 2 in your life? Because you can have, you know, people could tell you all these amazing things of what it's going to be like, and the fact that you're great with kids and this and this and this, and then you have a kid and then they turn out like completely different to that. Again, I'm really not a fan of these assumptions and expectations of like, this is how it's going to be, because, you know, it's a little bit like birth plans, right? You know, people are going to make these gorgeous things like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and it's going to be exactly like this, and then you're going to have this music playing and it'll be like a beautiful home birth, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
And then, you know, 2 months earlier, boom, birth's happening, or, you know, it's going to be a C-section, or no, we're off to the hospital, or, you know, it's kind of like raising a child is that, but, you know, magnified. So best to be adaptable and flexible and be up for the ride.
Yes. That makes sense. It's like if you're a control freak, then that can help you be less of one, or it can worsen
Yes.
it on a whole.
Oh, I bet there's probably a lot of control freaks that are just like, that was the best thing that happened to me, you know, becoming a mother or becoming a father, and it just like, I had to just let go. Maybe that's what I need. Maybe that's what I need. Damn it. I've had a kid. Not by any means calling myself a control freak.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I love it. My next question for you is, I know like with the pandemic, it's been shaping a lot of different things. Like when it comes, I know work especially, but a lot of people rethinking their priorities. I know for me,
Mm,
it's changed a lot for me in terms of how I view the future and then how I view
mm,
security and planning for the
mm.
future. Anyways, that's like preamble to, to lead to the
Oh, okay.
question, which is because you published the first edition of this book in 2014. And is there any modifications that you'd make since publishing it and considering things like the pandemic or any other life experiences that
Mm.
you've gone through?
Interesting. I hadn't even thought of the pandemic, but I mean, I've definitely been reading. I'm vegan, so there's like in the whole
Oh,
plant-based food world kind of, arguments against even like the way that we raise animals for food and the way that like environmentally we're chopping down forests and getting in connection, like humans getting into connection with animals that we wouldn't normally have been in contact with, or raising animals in a certain way that means that we're more likely to get these diseases. When was it that we had mad cow disease, for example? But like,
oh
so
yeah,
there's this
freaky.
this feeling of there's more pandemics coming, and so that will be an interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. What I have been thinking about a lot though, and I've been noticing a lot of like various studies asking young people, and by young people, I think it's kind of like late teens to early 30s, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and now actually consciously bringing in the climate change thing into their decision around kids. And when I was rereading my book, just to kind of familiarize myself with what I'd written again before we talked, I was really surprised, like, oh, it wasn't even a like climate change, like it wasn't even something I'd thought of back then to include in that. And the important thing for me with the book was that I really wanted to not be preachy or trying to sway in either direction. And so I'm not too sure how I would integrate something like that, but maybe it might be something to do with like a chapter just about, or it could be an exercise in terms of like, consider this. Is it something that's concerning for you? Is it not? How could you think differently around it? What could I don't know, like as you can see, like I haven't written the second edition, so that would be something, but I know that
Yeah.
that is something, it is a big topic for lots of people. So if I was doing it for people who would benefit, that would actually be nice to incorporate that into it. And in that same vein, again, because I wrote it so much coming from my own position and what my process was as I was trying to work it out, I'd written so heavily from the angle of, even I think earlier on, I make the comment, you might be solo, you may or may not have a partner, you might even have some other scenario, like group scenario of raising a kid or something like that. I kind of touch on it, but then like throughout the book, I definitely notice I slip easily back into you're becoming a mother, or you're, like stay-at-home mom, and talk about this with your partner. Assumptions that I did, which I would definitely, ideally, I would want to open that up. Yeah, I would have to think about this a lot, but ideally, I would want to really have a deeply inclusive feeling to it. And even at some point, not that long ago, I went through and just like, you're allowed with ebooks to make like tiny changes. And I changed some of the things like, stay at home mom to stay at home parent, or this is probably something that's really useful to discuss with your partner. And I think I changed a couple of those to like anyone else that you might be raising this child with, or using the word people or parents rather than, so inclusive for whatever your scenario is, whether you're solo, whether you're in a partnership, whether you're in a polycule, for example, in the polyamory world, transgender, like, and even within that, not just inclusive language, but maybe incorporating more sections that highlight the different scenarios you might be facing or you might want to consider in each of these different sort of areas. And I don't know how I would do that necessarily, because it's sold internationally and you can't really, there's no point me talking about like the social services situation in New Zealand when the bulk of my people are in America and I don't really know them. Yeah. But then what about the poor people in England? Like, so that would be stuff to consider. As you can see, I haven't done the research on that.
That's okay.
I feel like there might be some websites out there about all that stuff now, though. That's all right.
That's okay. Yeah. And that's something too that could be put in there. I mean, some places I find are more progressive than others in the things that they offer, and that could be like maybe like a future call to action. Not to say to put this, of course, but like maybe like as people read that, it could be like a call to action of like, hey, like different places in the world need to step up and see this, like look at what's happening over here, look at the support that's, or I don't know, it would be nice because I know some places like are way more advanced and way more like just beyond in how they do things and
Yeah.
their societal values, that kind of thing, but
Yeah. Yeah.
not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so when you're considering these various questions in the book, it is that thing to, like, just because I'm writing about it in New Zealand and you're in America and someone else is like in India or someone else is like out in some rural place, wherever, like it's gonna be so different considering, like, for me, I always think I love and I miss. I say that with a big question mark because like the introvert in me like pulls back immediately. But I think there's this tribal element that's kind of missing from our community.
Mhm.
We have these little isolated families. But if you're living in a society where it doesn't have that isolated feeling, and it is more like it is the village raising the
Yes.
children.
Yeah.
And man, I even like just noticed I had such a Pākehā like white thought just now, because there are places in New Zealand, I'm sure, where there's like a really good, solid Maori tribal connection, and you have all the aunties all connected in. Like, so this is my experience,
Yeah.
and each person is going to have to really reflect on, yeah, like how, yeah, man, it's such a big topic. So complicated, right?
What were some resources or resource which was monumental for you when you were going through the process of making the decision for yourself?
I love this word monumental. It's really cool.
Sounds fabulous.
There was a book that was really, really eye-opening, and I just had I still am in awe. That's too much of a word, but it was a very, very good book to come across, and it was called Childfree and Loving It. And
Hey.
it was after I'd been, reading all these parenting books and becoming a parent, and how I talked about all these like Disneyfied things that weren't, it felt like they were just glossing over the top, or again like big assumptions that I just found myself again and again thinking, well, like who says, so I came across that book and just reading that, and I think it was actually that book is where I got the idea for putting the parent myths, or like parent myths and child-free myths in there. Because it actually delved into all these big assumptions that people were making, and it had these really beautiful straight up quotes of people and how they felt about. I just love the like honesty, the brutal honesty in that book. That was really a nice monumental of like, oh, thank goodness, I'm getting a bit of a balance. That was really good. I had a monumental experience as well, which is a bit like hippie style, but it was really monumental. I don't know if you've ever heard of family constellation work, which came from a guy, Bert Hellinger, and I think maybe he was Austrian or something. Anyway, so I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but it's like a therapeutic, spiritual kind of thing where you set out your family situation and people stand in for you. You set the people up in their positions, and you kind of sit back and someone facilitates and checks in how people are feeling and moves them around and checks in. And so there was this moment where someone was standing in and representing my potential future baby child. And interestingly enough, it was a woman who was pregnant. Like I chose her, so that kind of makes sense. But anyway, so she's standing there, she's pregnant. And there was this point where like all the people are getting asked at various points, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And she made the comment, she was looking at the people that were standing in for like the people who are in my life. And she said, "You're all talking about me as if I'm a project or as if I'm a hobby or as if I'm a pet. Like, I'm a human being. This is no little decision. This is, like, this isn't something just to decide on a whim. I'm a human." And, maybe she emotionally was connecting so much more intensely with that because she was pregnant. I don't know. But I really remember just sitting and listening and watching and observing and just kind of going, ooh, like, it kind of had this like depth to it. Maybe the discussion before then had been kind of about like fulfillment and like just a little bit more beautiful and maybe a little bit more dignified, and she's like brought the whole thing crashing down to the ground. It was like, this is what it is, it's just, yeah. So that really connects with that word monumental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like it makes it real. Like, I love how you keep using that word Disneyfied, because I feel like when thinking about, and maybe it might be a result of who I've surrounded myself with and the content that I've surrounded myself with, without trying to be more conscious about exposing myself to other things and other people and their ideas. But I feel that's the common idea, is like, you should choose to be a mother, you should choose to have, like, that's the common, and then it's always followed up by the good reasons why, and the fearful reasons why you would not, or it's like all the good reasons why, and then it's also like fear mongering reasons of like, this is what you're going to miss out on. So when you say that word Disneyfied, it's like, and then when you say that example of the pregnant lady who just like was totally real about it, and as you like balance things out, so you could see, hey, it's not all glamour in that way.
Man, I didn't use the word glamour. I don't know if glamour's connected. It's not all fun. It's not all fun, maybe.
Yes, it's not all fun. Yeah, that was me. I said glamour.
That's totally right. Just like glamour. Wow. I don't connect glamour with parenting. But yeah, like it's really easy to connect in with, I think, the fun and the beauty. And
yes,
like Farah, I have like,
yeah.
But I think the interesting thing for me is like, I have these, I really adored, maybe even loved some of the children that I cared for. Like one of the, he was 3 years old at the time, this boy that I was a nanny to in Germany. And oh man, this was like the first weekend that we met, and there was this beautiful moment of me reading to him, and I was lying on the ground on my back, and he climbed up and lay with his head on my chest, and then fell asleep.
Oh.
And it was just this like these beautiful, beautiful moments. Like that's what I think it's really easy to get caught up in.
Yeah.
Thinking about children, like these moments of like holding this gorgeous baby that's looking up at you, and everything's tiny, and they have these gorgeous eyes, or they like times when I've another boy who I used to like babysit regularly, and we would, when he was going to bed, and we would sing together. And like go on adventures to the beach with his dog, and all these like I have so many just gorgeous moments with children who I've been part of, being as a babysitter or a nanny, and it's just they're so special. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in that, and I think it's okay to get caught up in that. But again, if you're in this situation and you realize, oh, I'm actually a bit on the fence, I'm not too sure, then I think if we want to be logical or rational about it, then we're kind of doing ourselves a disfavor to only look at that side of things without going, okay, what are some of the other elements?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely agree. What feedback have you received from those who you are aware have done the exercises in your book?
People are relieved. That's generally the feedback that I've got. I remember someone telling me that it was really comforting to have their thoughts and their concerns normalized, because they had been thinking about all this stuff, and like you said, having lots of people just saying, oh, like, just do it, like, it's awesome, it's like, you'll be great, like all these like wishy-washy general comments, and no one was allowing space for the, yeah, but this and this and this and this and this, or hey, but I'm thinking about this. Everyone would be like, I'm just trying to dismiss everything.
Yeah.
And so that feeling of like, oh great, finally, like someone's putting into words and putting it onto paper what I've been thinking about, and actually giving me a structure to be able to process this thing, without falling into the fear of it, without falling into dismissing myself, really giving myself space to acknowledge, like, yeah, okay, that is a real thought that I'm thinking, or a real emotion that I'm thinking. Let's honor that by unpacking and by looking at it. So yeah, a lot of relief. Man, there was one woman who wrote, she was a legend. She wrote me like a really long email and did like a really massive Amazon review, which was like adorable. And I think for her it was just, like she hadn't been able to find like that kind of resource before. Again, like the word relief comes to mind. This relief of like, oh, yay, I get to, here's a structure I can slot myself into, because before that it's just this whirlwind of not knowing. And that's basically what I experienced as well, was there's all these thoughts, there's all these like things, and whenever I try and talk to anyone about it, they just go like, you'll be fine, you're great with kids.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, awesome, I know, but like and so I feel like this is a thing that as humans we like anyway, right? This sense of structure. It's a little bit like if we want to learn a topic, sometimes it can feel overwhelming, and that's why sometimes people sign up for a course. So like, great, this is 6 weeks. Oh, I can see the table of contents. We're going to be learning this, and then we're going to be learning this, and we're going to be learning this, and by the outcome I'm going to be able to do this and this and this and this. Great. It means that I can let go of that kind of trying to provide the structure.
See how needed your book is? See how needed it was?
Yeah.
And still is. And will
Probably.
continue to be.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Definitely very awesome. I can attest to that from my personal experience, is a feeling of relief at looking at all these different areas. And there's honestly, it's opened the door for things that I want to explore more. Like I want, as you were sharing, like sometimes it's just there's just an abundance of certain resources, and then there's like a scarcity of other resources. And now I'm like, well, I'm reading about Childfree now, and then it's just there's different elements that I didn't really think about. Oops, sorry, okay, yeah, there's different, it's just kind of opened up some nooks and crannies, and I'm like, you know what, I have time, I want to look into this area a little bit more. So nice. Yeah. And then I just randomly thought about this stat that you said about like raising children, the amount it costs. I was like, ooh, okay, that's good to know too.
When I reread that, I thought, I wonder what it is now.
Yes.
7 years ago, so but even that, like, how much does it cost to raise a kid? Well, that's going to vary, right? Like, depending on the lifestyle that I want to create, depending on the house that I want to live in, depending on like how many things we want to have in our house, depending on what schooling I want to send them to, depending on whether we're doing hand-me-downs for clothes or buying new clothes, and then what kind of clothes. And so again, like, even though there's some stats, like that's just somewhere in like the average middle or whatever, or a calculation and division, but where you want to be on that with that. But it's stuff to consider, right?
Definitely gives you that starting point. Yeah. Yeah. What have you found people to be most stuck on when it comes to making this decision?
You touched on this just before, this idea of I should know. Well, no, you touched on, like, there's kind of 2 key things that come to mind, and one is I should know the answer of whether I want to be a parent or not. And also, I should want to become a parent. I think that was the one that you touched on. Like, it's for whatever reason, through osmosis, through your community, family, whatever, there's this underlying, like, there's something wrong with me if I don't want to, like, what, yeah, I should want to become a mum. Whenever I or any of my clients start coming out with the shits, that for me is just like, oh, alarm bells, you know, like, because, you know, according to whom, you know, like, who says? You want to be like the 3-year-old, like, you know, who says, you know? Yeah, like, so for me, it's like, it's really easy to get caught up in that. Like, I should want kids. I should want to become a mom because, like, I've got a partner who I know would be like, he ticks the boxes in terms of like how I would want to have someone that I feel comfortable being the dad, the father of my children. And I have a lot of skills, like I have a lot of experience even. And like, we have a house. And yeah, if you kind of have all these like, why don't I? I should. But where does that lead you in your thinking if you ask that question and you get stuck on that? I just notice it within myself. It's kind of, it feels like a dead end.
Hmm.
You know, it's like, why? Yeah, I should, but I kind of don't. And so, yeah. And then logically in my head, it's like, I go to like, yeah, what's wrong with me? And that's a shitty place to go to, you know? So yeah, I think it's really easy to get stuck on that. And to unstuck it, it's just rather like, okay, let's just like, who are you? What's important to you? Where do you want to go in life? What are the pros and cons? What do you like about this? What don't you like about, like, and everything is valid. It's okay. Like, there is no should. Let's get rid of those shoulds. Yeah, it would be that same thing. Like, oh, I should because I have a great career and I've built that up and I have great savings and like my parents are alive, so they could be like part of the grandparent thing. Like, it would be so easy to really go down that. And I think people ask themselves, what's wrong? Yeah, what's wrong with me? It's like that's the natural progression of that like that question, eh?
Yeah. And when you say that, it leads me to think of things I've commonly heard connecting with when women say that, because I watched some YouTube videos about women who are like happily child free, and the things that people have told them, they commonly hear that they're selfish. They commonly get called like the term spinster, which is used as a
Yeah, wow,
derogatory
that's so
term.
old
Things and
school, that language.
like,
But isn't it funny the selfish thing? Because in a
yeah.
way, sometimes it's rather the opposite. You know, when you ask someone, oh, why are you having kids? You know, some people say, this is the bit that kind of warps me, that they'll say, oh, wow, you're deciding not to have children? Whoa, that's a really big decision to make. Like, whoa, are you sure? And for me, I think, no, isn't it? Oh, you're deciding to have children? You're deciding to throw the world as you know it, like, into this big unknown, and to like, whoa, that's a big decision. You know, wow, what are you doing that for? I don't go around saying this to people, by the way, but, you know, like, that's kind of, you know, just noticing like, oh, is it a big decision or is what you're doing a big decision? You know, of course there are big consequences either way.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you ask people about like, why are you doing it, they will give you very selfish reasons. You know, they'll say, well, you know, because I wanna have a house which is filled with people, and I want to be able to give my love to you know, my children, and I want to be able to like impart my knowledge, and I want, you know, like, it's so many, this is my decision, and this is because I want it. And I am right now thinking about, yeah, so I think that's a really interesting one. I think it's okay that they want all those things, like 100%, that's brilliant. They've got clear reasons why, and that's why they don't need to read my book, you know. But it's a bit harsh to say that people are being selfish. And again, like, people throw those kind of comments out there without actually knowing anything about the person.
And they're,
you know, like, I've often thought that if I have children, and again, like, I don't know this, I'm just guessing, but I've often thought, gosh, if I had children, would I still be able to do my job? Or would I need to take a job somewhere where I'm like out in the back room down in the cellars, like just filing stuff away, like, please everyone be quiet, like don't talk to me about anything.
That's my job right now.
That's your job. Awesome.
Not a lot of people interaction.
Yeah, but I often think that because like I love there's so much about like giving and caring and listening and like the way I work isn't just like you're sitting there and talking to me and I'm kind of just nodding and like no, I'm like so engaged and really like working with the person and I love it and it takes energy. And there's definitely times if me and my husband have each had a number of sessions in a row in a day, and then we'll both kind of say, yeah, like should we just have like alone time tonight, because that's just what we need. And so I don't even know where did I come to from that, but yeah, that's kind of just it's interesting noticing these kinds of things. Okay, so the assumptions of calling someone selfish, I kind of don't feel selfish when I think, goodness me, like I put so much energy into helping people and really like fully being there for them, and it would be the same thing. I'm sure that there are some people that, like volunteer a lot with, like, I think from the Childfree and Loving It book, there was a scenario of someone who said, like, I work in a kindergarten and I get, I can really look after and love all these children. And I can only do that because I don't have my own. So just because they don't have kids doesn't mean that they're just, sipping at home, having their little champagne and like, with their fancy house and like not doing anything for anyone else. And that's also okay if they are. Like, I think, like all these like, so what? So what if they are choosing? No, I'm just going to look after myself in this life. Like we get so caught up in like, what's your life? What brings your life value, or what's your life purpose or something? And like, as if we should all be achieving so much, or, it's actually okay just to be like, you know what, like it's enough for me just to get through life and look after myself and try and do a good job with that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. I think that's a validation that a lot of people need to hear. Like a major one. Yeah.
What's that? It's okay just to get through life?
To take care of yourself, because I know, and of course, as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about myself.
Of course,
and then other people who come to mind, and it's just like, I know for like myself and some of the people I connect with the most, a big part of why we relate to each other is because we have this strong ambition. But then it's like, I've learned over time where my ambition comes from. And a lot of it comes from feeling this need to compensate or overcompensate. And so hearing you say that, it reminds me of like, because there's so many times I would like harm myself to look out for others or to give to others or to achieve certain goals. And it would come at the cost of myself. And then of course you take it out on yourself in other ways, destructive ways. So sorry, not to make it all like drab, but it's like, as you say that, I'm like, I feel like a lot of people feel that, especially when we have these ideas of what success is in the world and what we should be striving for and have achieved by a certain point in our life. And
wow. Yeah. What's wrong? Again, what's wrong with me? I'm 30. I don't have a house. I don't have a boyfriend, and I don't have kids. Shit. And I'm only working part-time. What a loser. Like, again, where did that come from? Who said? It's interesting as well, this idea of looking after ourselves. And that's one of the traps that I see. Sorry, I'm just veering off. And
no problem. Do your thing.
But, like, I'm just thinking, like, one of the things that I see again and again, mostly with women who are mothers, that they really need to get that skill back of being able to take some little time for themselves. And maybe that's actually the source of these accusations about selfishness. Like, I'm just guessing here, but like, where does that come from? But a lot of women will have that feeling like, I'm just running around and I'm looking after everyone, and I put this down, but then I notice that there's 5 other jobs over here, and then so-and-so needs me, and then I got to go and drive and pick this person up, and then I got to do this, and I got to do this. And they really take on like the load, and not just the practical load, but the mental load of organizing and structuring everything. And so, like to allow this, I wouldn't call it selfishness, but to allow this, like this self-care into the mix would be really useful and really beneficial, actually, not just for themselves, but for their families as well. That they can just take some time out, like, and if that means having to have some really difficult questions, difficult conversations with their partner, if they have one, about, sharing the load, or if it means that they need to like let go of some of their high expectations about how the house should look like, or how much like the quality of homework or whatever, like to actually give themselves some love and like just talking about like having a cup of tea and maybe looking outside and watching the trees blowing in the wind or something, or just pausing. I think that's so important.
Yeah, like stop and smell the roses.
Yeah, literally.
Lesson in life. Yeah.
And then the interesting thing is, again, like that might feel selfish, but you're not only caring for it's like the oxygen mask on first, before it's kind of like that feeling, or like recharging your batteries so that you have more energy to give your family. But it's also meaning, and then my children also see mom looking after herself. They see that, hey, it's okay that like mum is valuable. She's a valuable person in this family as well. She's just not the slave running around after us. And also, as a mum, as a female, it's okay for her to do that. So I think really, again, I'm such a fan of like unpacking and questioning, like what's behind these things, like these things that we tell ourselves, or the things that people tell ourselves. So, I think, did we just start with the word selfish, and it's like, well, let's unpack that.
Yes. That was amazing. Oh, that one, that really affected me a lot.
Yeah, you need to stop and have some tea and watch the trees. Or
after we finish, I need to take a moment. It's a reminder. Luckily, it's Friday evening here, so it's a good reason to just take some time, read a
bit of energy came to you.
Yes.
I love how you're kind of like in dance party mode about reading a book. Awesome.
Yes.
You're my kind of person.
Yes, it's the best thing in the world. I love it. Now, these are just some topics to see what your thoughts are on them. If there's anything that you've come across when you were working on your book and going through the process yourself, or talking to your clients or readers of your book, because these are things that we're kind of also looking into or discussing as part of the season of parenthood, pregnancy, that kind of thing on the podcast. So what are your thoughts, or what are some things that you've learned when it comes to how to successfully, for those individuals who desire to become a parent and have a career as well? I'm especially thinking of female, just because I'm a female and I know that there can be some barriers there that may not be there for men in some areas. And so what are some things you've learned or heard about when it comes to successfully juggling parenthood and developing one's career?
Good question. First, what comes to mind for me with that is, again, like it so depends on the individual. I'm always in awe whenever I read like articles or like, stories about a woman who got pregnant and then like during her pregnancy just did something wild, like started this multinational business or something, or their child has eczema and therefore they started like playing around with home things, and then like their friends started buying it and now it's like being sold nationwide, or like a woman is a CEO, and I mean, I'd prime minister is a good example, right? Like, being prime minister and then like just being pregnant and just giving birth while being in office and then raising your kid. I'm just like, huh? It shouldn't be like that. But when I'm reacting like that, that's because of my personality. Nothing about like, I think it should be completely normal and standard, and it's okay and it's great. So for some women, I notice, and part of me thinks, or at least suspects, that they're super extroverted. There's some magic tool that they have up their sleeve. But the addition of a child or children doesn't seem to get in any way, like, doesn't stop them in their stride. And for some women, it seems like it boosts it even more. Like, and that must be, what some people will talk about. They're like, oh, now I finally feel like I have a purpose in life. I look back at the me before kids and I think, what the hell? Like, I thought that my life had some kind of value, but no, it doesn't have any value now at all. Like, now I really have a reason to be on this planet, or now I really have a reason to make this business work or to get ahead. And so I think there's a super, like, the turbo drive which kicks in for people in those moments. And so if you're like that internally, your own internal system and personality, like, it just seems to take care of itself. And for some, it's not that easy. And so what I think comes to mind in terms of when I think about clients and situations where I've seen it working and not working, or going not so well, or it's more challenging, and kind of what's useful in those situations is being super flexible and adaptable, and knowing that that's gonna be part of it. It almost ties in with when we were talking earlier around, being kind of wary around the assumptions. Yes. So knowing, actually, if I have a child, there's so many different things around childcare, or if they're just randomly sick, or if I have to work late, how am I going to deal with that? Like this, like just fine details. And I think a lot of people don't think that far ahead because they kind of don't need to, because they just had that instant, oh, I want to have children for these reasons, whatever. And so then they kind of go, oh, wow, So I think being adaptable and just knowing, like, hey, that's just going to be part of it. I need to go with the flow here. And so letting go of, like, that's its own thing, I guess. Like, letting go of perfection, I think is I see that when people do that works really well. And if they're holding on to perfection, that can definitely make things a hell of a lot more challenging. And that would be anything from, I'm only successful if I definitely turn up at the office at this amount of, by this o'clock in the morning, no matter if my kid is sick or they can't find their fluffy bunny and they throw a tantrum or whatever. But I definitely have to be at the office at such and such, and I have to look immaculate. Or even though I have kids, I definitely still want to reach this management level by X amount of months' time. Like, it's probably a really good life skill anyway, to just have this adaptability. Like, you kind of set your goals, but know that you're going to be able to move with the flow of life if for whatever reason it doesn't work out. Like, I think that's a good recipe for feeling overall contentment in life. And again, like, it depends on the situation. And this is where I was thinking as well, around the whole, like, the tribal thing, and, like, what's your community like? What's your wider family structure like? Are you just going to be raising the family in a small little unit, or is it going to be part of a bigger connection? Because depending on that situation will have a massive effect in terms of what other things you need to work out. So I'm just thinking about support, for example. So what I've seen working really, really well is when parents will band together and say stuff like, okay, like, we're our own little club in a way, and we can call on each other if someone is at work and they can't pick up their kid, and then I know that I can text her and she'll be like, not a problem, I got this. They'll come, because you all know each other's timetables with the days that you're working, and like, just this kind of if it's not already there with family or, you know, some kind of unit in that sense, then creating that, getting some kind of support structure, I think is super important. Because, yeah, then it just means that you're not going to be as flustered when, I don't know, like your kid's in the sick bay or something and the school is calling up and saying, you have to come now. Although you probably would have to actually come now because your friends, like the deal is after school care. I don't know. I mean, it's tricky, but unless you had that, you know, like it happened a couple of times, you're like, oh man, like that sucks. Yeah, and we've both had that experience. Actually, let's do that. You know, like let's look after each other's kids in those moments.
Have to be there for each other.
Yeah, really being there for each other. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But I think it's that thing about society, at least Western society, where sometimes there's these huge expectations, and you know, maybe part of it is as well these days that ties in with maybe some of the social media stuff that there's, I think it was there beforehand, again, like, oh, at this level I should be doing this, or I should be doing this, or I should be doing this, or even it would be easy. I remember a friend who has a couple of kids as well, and she was saying she was looking at these like parenting support thing, like pages online, and looking at all these amazing like craft things that they're creating for like babies, and all the hours of work that people would go into creating them, and just feeling kind of overwhelmed and a little bit like, oh, I'm not doing that, and oh, like I'm not really a good mom because I'm not creating these little glitter things, and I haven't created like these amazing craft things. So it'd be really similar to the career stuff, that I think it would be really easy to look around and think, well, you know, Joanna's managing it all right, you know, and she's made middle management, and like, why haven't I? You know, or it appears because blah blah blah, they put up some photos of them all going to Hawaii last year, and well, not last year, maybe a couple of years ago before COVID. But you know, like, how are they affording that trip? And you know, something. Yeah. So being super flexible, and like, again, we don't know what kind of issues our kids going to have, and what that throws us, and what they're going to require from us, and how we're going to respond in that parenting situation. So just knowing, like, again, like being soft and gentle with ourselves, and knowing like, hey, this is one of my favorite things of all time to say, by the way. It's like, you know, like anyone's basically doing the best that they can at a particular time with the resources that they have, you know, and just knowing that, yeah, Joanna's managing this, and these guys are going off to Hawaii, and I don't know the full story anyway with these guys, you know, but in my current situation, you know, maybe I'm finding it really tough to like hang in there with my job, and I'm really missing my kid, and I've put them into some kind of childcare scenario, and it's like breaking my heart that someone else is looking after my kid during the day. But like, damn it, I really want to move forward in my job and my career, and I'm kind of exhausted, and man, you know, and it's okay, you know, like I'm doing the best that I can with the resources that I have. And sure, I had this idea that it would be great to be at this level by now, or I had this idea that I really wanted to be able to be part of that project or to put my hand up for it, but I can't right now. And it's okay. Just, it is what it is. So yeah, it's like that flexibility, but that self-compassion or that self-care element in there as well.
Yeah, that hit home as well.
Oh,
yeah, because I feel like sometimes we might have unreasonable expectations for ourselves, or like you said it so well many times, of how we just don't know how things are going to be. We don't know what the personality, if we were to have a child or children, what their personality or personalities might be, or the situation that we might be in, and it's just unknown, and so like you can have plans, but it might not necessarily go that way.
I think there's a psychologist in New Zealand, I think his name's Nigel Latter, and he's done some really cool like TV shows and about raising children and stuff, and he's a psychologist. And I think in one of his shows he talks about, you know, before I had kids, I thought I knew everything about kids. I thought I knew everything about parenting, you know, and I knew how to do that, you know. And then I had kids, and then I realized forget about it. Like none of it's important, none of it's valid, none of it works. and I've seen some of my colleagues as well, like NLP colleagues who then have children and then kind of say, oh shit, this is really hard, and there's so much, and I'm really aware of that as well. Like there were certain things that I was really looking forward to with my own children, and it's all about like, beautiful experiences I want to have with them and how I want to respect and acknowledge their like emotions and their struggles at any age. And again, this is something I was really able to do with the kids I was babysitting. Like there was one kid who was really nervous about going to kindergarten, and I remember we were going for a ride and he was at the back of the bike. It was so cute. And then like somehow he either was talking about something and I stopped the bike and we sat down and we talked about like, oh, and I was like, what is it about kindergarten that's so scary? Like, tell me about that. And then he's like, well, and it all turned out he was so scared about like, how does it work with nappies? And because he was still sometimes wearing things and like using the toilet. And it was so gorgeous to be able to really take that seriously. Like, here's a little human being. And this is a super valid concern of his at this stage of life that he's at. And that was something I remember even like as maybe like an 8-year-old myself. And when sometimes adults would talk to me like a kid, and I found that really insulting because for me, I didn't feel like a kid. And that was something I really consciously like stored away. When I'm older, don't talk to kids like they're a kid. Like really show them respect in a way. But these are things that I kind of had really decided when I have children. These are the important things. I'm really gonna do good communication. I'm gonna like respect all these things. And I just know now that like, oh, what a fairy tale, like it's a wonderful thing. And it would be something that I'd probably guide myself back to again and again and again and have to like really work hard at it because it's something that I really value. But if I was to be like bashing myself over the head about not doing a good job, it would be around some of that stuff that I'd be feeling like as a counselor or as a therapist, I should be doing a better job at this. Like far out. There's just a lot on your plate as a parent. And I think everyone's just got to like just ease up on that self-blame and guilt and judgment and just notice like, oh, it's not super easy. Like, who told me it was going to be? Where did that even come from?
Yeah, I hear you. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Wow. I'm just thinking of some of my friends who recently became parents within the last 5 years, and I'm just like,
yeah,
they need to hear this because yeah, I can through some of our conversations where they'll even share it or like just how things have changed, like the relationships, and it's just. But as you've said that, it's like I get this sense of that would be helpful for them to hear because just things are not the same or there's all these concerns that they have that I can't relate to and I don't even know how to be a good support for them because I'm like, I have no idea how to relate except to just be here for you. But I feel like they could.
And that's enough. That's enough. You don't need to know the answer. You don't need to be able to fix it. That's probably not even what they're asking from you.
Yeah.
If you just listen and go, that sounds really tough.
Yeah.
Maybe that's enough already.
That helps me feel a lot better too.
Yeah, cool. You can always check in with them and say, yeah, what do you need when you're telling me that stuff? How can I best support you as a friend?
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll be able to tell you what the answer is there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you've shared that you've decided to choose to live a child-free life. And so can you share more about what you've learned and what you've put into practice for living a fulfilling child-free life?
Personally, I guess it's just coming back to those questions around what are my life values? Like what's important to me? One of the things that I talk about in the book is one of the exercises, this idea of like going out into the future in your mind and seeing yourself as an 80-year-old person. You can either imagine like interviewing the 80-year-old you or being the 80-year-old you, but like getting into that space and then with the assumption like here I am fulfilled and content and so satisfied. Like at this time of my life where I've lived the vast bulk of my life, and here I am, gray haired and with a big smile on my face and with a calmness in my heart. And as that 80-year-old person, am reflecting back on my life, like, how did I live that? Like, what did I do? What was my day-to-day living like? Like, what was important to me? And I find that such a beautiful, again, it's kind of the same thing as asking yourself now, but it's just another way of like digging out some more information or plucking out something else that you might have missed. But for me, what it comes back to a lot is, and again, like these are my values in that sense, is being connected in with nature and like the basic things, being connected into with nature and living near the sea, and like it's really about kind of a slowness. So in my ideal world, there's a slowness about it. There's a slowness about getting up into the day, and there's a slowness about how I connect in with people in my work, even though sometimes I talk really fast and get super excited, or maybe want to like chuck a whole bunch of stuff in there. There's kind of this underlying same, like from a heart level, like a slowness of really being present and really hearing and feeling. And there's in that sense being able to like be creative with music, with photography, and with that stuff it means that I need kind of like a quietness in my head, so that I can really observe and think through what I want to do, like what are the different techniques or how do I want to work through that. My relationship with my husband is like super important, and we both actually did our NLP training together. He was the one that kind of said, hey, this is a cool thing, you might want to learn it as well. So awesome. And then we kind of continued, like we did our counseling training together as well. And so all of our psychological tools and stuff and developments and resources, like we've, for most part of it, gone along that journey together. And like that was something that was part of it for me as well. Like the whole deciding about children was like, ooh, that's a tricky one, because like my relationship with myself and my own well-being and this quietness that I keep talking about is really important, and this connection in with my husband and knowing I have the time and energy to really be able to like keep nurturing that. And I think at pretty ridiculous level when I compare it to relationships around me. These are those important things, But I've answered that for myself, what makes it fulfilling. And I think there was a really nice article one of my colleagues, Lynn Timpany, put up somewhere online at some point, and it was this whole thing around how do you live a fulfilling life if you never find the long-term partner that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, which is just Disney anyway, for lots of people. But and it, again, like talked about, well, like you have this amazing opportunity right here, like you have a lot of time, you could become a master in a number of things if you want. What's going to fulfill you? What's going to fill your bucket? What's going to put a big smile on your face? Where's your bliss? So it's that same thing. So with any individual, it's going to be a different answer, I would say. Mm-hmm. Like how do you live a fulfilling life without children? Like what are you into? What's important for you? What would you like to be? What would excite you? It is that question of asking ourselves there, like me as an 80-year-old looking back over life, feeling super satisfied, like what is she telling me about that she's done in her life, or how she's lived her life? And for some people it might be something like, oh, I volunteered a lot, I really helped out with so many organizations over the years. Or it might be about took photos of Antarctica every year. Like, I don't know, like it's just really going to depend on each person. But so if we talk about someone who, I think it can be really devastating for someone if they desperately want children, desperately want to be a parent, and who have maybe throughout their whole life known that about themselves, but it's this kind of like deeply held identity in a way. And then if it doesn't work for whatever reason, then I think, one of the answers to answering the question about how to live a fulfilling life is that thing around like, what did I want to get out of, when I imagine me as a parent, what is that? Like, what are the images I bring to mind? What are the activities that I see? What's the content of that? And I think there's a massive grieving period to get through as part of all of that. And at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can't fulfill some of those deeply held desires and things that you value so intensely. But it's about maybe getting creative about how you're going to live that. Or even to say, I can still live out some of this stuff just in a different way. And also maybe I can explore some other areas in my life that I haven't even explored yet, but maybe there's something else that I can also allow to flourish. Those people wouldn't be reading my book though, so they're not deciding. They know. They'll be like reading the grieving because I can't have kids book.
Yeah.
So it also is important, I think, to let go of any of those judgments as well. Like to live a fulfilling life, to whenever someone says to you, do you have kids? And you say no, and that they say, oh, why not? And you should, or whatever stuff. It's being able to, in your head, just going, that's their opinion right now. That's not a fact. That's their thought. Because if you kind of take that on and own it yourself, then you might feel that ongoing struggle in a way, or that clash.
So well said. Especially when you said it's like not a fact, just their opinion. Just you don't have to take it on. So the second last question for you before going on to hearing some of your top recommended resources is, if you were to distill the message of your book into one main point, what would that be?
Kind of boring, but I think it's just know yourself well. That's it.
I like it. It is an explorational. I don't think that's the word. It is an adventure. I will say, to go through the exercises, and actually, like, when you take the time to, like, I got a book, a journal, and I actually like wrote them, and I left it, and then like I simmered on some. Sometimes I came back and added stuff. It's definitely a great. I found I learned a lot about myself. Some stuff I knew already. Other stuff I'm like, oh, okay, I want to look into that more.
I think you've really hit on how that book, in order to get out of it the best that you can get out of it, like, it really is designed for that. The funny thing, I think that, I talked about this woman who did the massive Amazon review, and I think it was her that wrote something about, it comes across a little bit like as if it's a Cosmo questionnaire.
I remember, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
And I'm like, fair enough, because it kind of does. But the thing is, like, it's not, that book is not going to work if you just like flick through it and read it just at that surface level. And even if you just kind of read it and notice, I think this, or maybe, it's like, no. Like, there's so many bits where I've said, okay, so I want you to consider this. And then like the next paragraph is, and then now. And what I really mean is, like, I want you to consider this. Close the book, go away and consider it.
Yes.
Come up with your answer and come back and then do the next step. And I'm like, I want, like, it is 100% a workbook. Like, it needs to be, like, if you're going to get any value from it, the whole purpose is these are exercises, and they're only going to work if you really give yourself that time to actually go within and find those answers and to mull over it. And I love this idea of, like, really checking in with, we have these brain cells in our actual brain, but also in our heart and in our gut. Were you aware of that? It's wild. So, to really to connect in with all of these levels, to really kind of like, how do I feel about that? like, what's my gut saying?
Mhm.
Really, like, yeah, go deep. That's a, I still think of that woman, that pregnant woman, like, this is not a hobby. This is not a pet. This is a human being that you're considering bringing into the world, and you're not sure. So come on, take it seriously.
Yes.
And that was so powerful for me somehow.
Yeah.
And in a way, yeah, if you're not sure, then in a way you also owe it to yourself, and you owe it to that future kid to really check that out in a way. So yeah, know yourself well, basically.
Yeah.
And here's some exercises to do that.
I love it. Before we start to wrap up, thank you again, Maree, for spending time with us. Oh my gosh, I just adore you, and just thank you. Thank you
You're welcome.
for creating this resource and bringing me on this journey, your other readers on this journey, the freedom finders on this journey. Just thank you for taking that step and putting the time, and for spending time with us. And so before we jump into our last question, how can we continue to stay connected with you?
Good question. I'm on Facebook under the business name of nWow Counselling and Coaching. That's the main place where I'll chuck up any stuff that I think is interesting or like whatever. The website isn't so much of a like resource in that sense, but that would be if anyone wanted to like see if I had any availability to do a session or something. That would be the way to find me that way, which is just nwow.co.nz, nwow. But yeah, the Facebook page is probably like the best thing. I'm not a huge, massive poster though, so
You're intentional.
I'm intentional for sure.
That sounds great. And yes, we'll definitely post that information in the show notes for everybody to go take a look, along with of course Maree's book as well. Our final question is, what are your top 3 recommendations for our freedom finders who would like to know more about how to approach the decision-making process of whether or not to have a child, become a parent, and just exploring that topic?
In a way, that's such a typical answer from me, but their top resource is themselves. Like, and that's one of the questions in the book, really. How do you normally make good decisions? Or even like, how do you normally make great decisions? If we go back in our past and think of some like situations where we really decided something and we did it well and we were pleased with the outcome, like what was that process? Was it that you sat and like mulled it all out for 3 weeks and really wrote a lot in your diary? Or was it that you talked with a bunch of friends about it? Or was it you sat and meditated and then like followed your heart? At the end of the day, like you're going to be the best resource in terms of finding out what is going to work for you and whether what kind of decision to make. And it's pretty scarce out there in terms of good resources, at least last time I checked. But I did find as well, like just asking like the people around you who have children, like a variety of ages and a variety of ages of children. I found that really interesting. So people who are parents of newborns, parents of like the elderly who have adult children, people who have teenagers. Like if you really ask all of these different people, I find that really interesting, with it in mind that their answers are going to be different as well, depending on what stage their children are at. And just being really curious in a way. If we can call that a resource, that's a really great resource as well, just to like approach this whole thing with curiosity and really being curious about their assumptions, being curious about other people's assumptions, being curious about just everything, and just going, how does this sit with me? What's my truth when I reflect on that?
Thank you. Resources are resources, and thank you for sharing with us how these are have been beneficial for you, and it just helps us to know there's many ways that we can go about making decisions. And as you were sharing, it's like go with what resonates the most with us, and just honor that. We don't have to use specific things, just go. There's so many things out there. Go with what makes the most sense for each of us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think it's getting to that point that whatever you decide, knowing, and this is okay. And it might be the same or it might be different than the people that are around me. And that's okay too.
Thank you so much, Maree.
Oh, thank
And
you, Alisia.
It's
lovely.
My pleasure. And Freedom Finders, remember to always honor your time and honor your energy. Please check out and connect with Maree, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Teach Me Freedom podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and found it beneficial. Feel free to reach out to us at teachmefreedom2020@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the show on your favorite platform for streaming content. Feel free to comment and leave a 4 or 5 star review if you feel so inclined. Connect with you next time.